Hello and welcome. We'll just wait a few more moments as everyone's coming in to join us today. It's great. We're getting lots of people joining us. If you just joined us, hello and welcome. Right, just give it a few more moments. Good evening. Seeing getting some global coverage here from the Philippines. Hi, everyone. Fantastic. Great to see you all. Greetings in the chat. We'll just give it one more moment and then we'll get started. Okay, perfect. We'll get started on this session today. Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Regenerating Destinations Through Nature Positive Tourism webinar. This session is the first of 3 within the Nature Positive Tourism Explained series, presented by the Nature Positive Tourism Partnership, and that includes WTTC, UN Tourism, and the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. My name is Rebecca Whitehead, Sustainability Manager at WTTC, and today I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we get started, here are some housekeeping points we'd like to run through. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on the WTTC website as soon as it's ready. You can activate subtitles in a range of different languages. You can also use the Q&A function to send through any questions, and we will do our best to get through as many as we can. If we can't answer your question today, we will do our best to get back to you via the email address you signed up with. It would be helpful if you could please have your full name and organization on Zoom. I invite you to ask as many questions as you want and take the opportunity to hear what these expert voices have to say. We will share links to the reports we reference throughout the webinar available in the chat function. These reports can also be found on our Research Hub. Let's take a look at today's agenda. We'll start with some opening remarks, followed by a setting of the scene from Dr. Ante Mandic from IUCN on the role of tourism as a guardian of nature. We will then hear from the destination perspective with Gwen Reyes from Visit Scotland and Christiane Zeiden from the Red Sea Global, before diving into the business and NGO perspective with Keisha Morgan from Exodus Adventure Travels, Camille Drevelon from Abercrombie & Kent, and Francesca Mahoney from Wild Survivors. Each presentation will be followed by a Q&A, which will be supported by a hand-picked panel of leading experts in biodiversity science and nature-positive practices, all with experience in travel and tourism. We are particularly excited to bring you this opportunity, and they will remain on hand to share their knowledge and experiences throughout the other webinars in this series. On the call, we would like to welcome Professor Kelly Bricker, Professor in Sustainable Tourism, Ecotourism, and Nature-Based Recreation, Boris Barov, Chief Operating Officer at European Chapter of the Society for Ecological Restoration, SER International, and lastly, Daniel Turner, Director at Animondial and Specialist in Applied Animal Welfare Science and the Nature Positive Tourism Approach. I would also like to extend an acknowledgement to Dirk Glaser, Director, Sustainable Development of Tourism at UN Tourism, and Glenn Manzik, CEO at the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. Please do not hesitate to use the Q&A function on Zoom to bring your burning questions to the table. With this, I would like to invite our VP of Policy, Christopher Imsen, to open the webinar and share some context on the Nature Positive Partnership and approach. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Becky, and hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see over 200 of you from around the world joining us today for the very first session of our Nature Positive Tourism Explained series. And I'm delighted to open this on behalf of WTTC, together with our partners at UN Tourism and the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. So Dirk, Glenn, it's great to have you here. And of course, hosting this during COP30 is no coincidence. If there's one message that's becoming clear every year, it's that nature action is climate action. Trees store carbon, mangroves protect coastlines, healthy ecosystems make us more resilient. So talking about nature today is not just relevant, it's absolutely essential. But beyond climate, nature is simply where travel and tourism belongs. It's the heart of what we offer. As someone much wiser than me once said, nature is the book and tourism is the publisher. We help people access it, explore it, and critically, to value it. And the numbers really show that. 80% of our goods and services are dependent on nature. More than half of global tourism demand is driven by nature, from safaris to countryside breaks. And nature-based tourism already generates over $665 billion a year. Now that's equivalent to slightly more than 2 days worth of total global economic activity. It's a lot, but the impact goes far beyond economics. Tourism revenue helps pay for rangers, supports protected areas, and sustains local communities. During COVID, for example, when those revenues disappeared, we saw poaching rise in many places. It was a stark reminder of how closely tourism and conservation are linked. But of course, we also have to acknowledge that our sector, like any economic sector, has impacts. Land use, pressures on ecosystems, resource consumption, all of that contributes to biodiversity loss. So the logic is pretty simple. If nature declines, the foundation of our sector declines with it. And if we invest in nature, we actually strengthen our own long-term business model. Now, there's good evidence for this. Studies show that for every dollar invested in protected areas in nature-based tourism, returns can be around 6 to 1. And these investments can also empower indigenous peoples and local communities who are the true custodians of many of the places our visitors love. But whereas most tourism businesses know they have a role to play in protecting nature, many aren't sure where to start. And honestly, that makes sense. Climate has clear global targets like 1.5 degrees and a universal metric, CO2. Nature isn't like that. It's deeply local. A species that's critical in one region can be harmful in another. A priority in the Caribbean won't necessarily match a priority in East Africa or China. Moreover, tourism businesses may not have the right guidance from conservation organizations or public agency. So a temptation can be to focus on high-profile symbols rather than the real conservation priorities on the ground, which again is completely understandable. Tourism companies are not biologists. They shouldn't need to be. They need guidance, context, and support at the destination level. Now, that's why WTTC, UN Tourism, and the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance joined forces and created the Nature Positive Tourism Partnership. Our shared vision is simple: a future where tourism lives within nature's boundaries and actively helps restore it. And to underpin our work, we carried out a global cross-sector consultation of leading businesses, academia, civil society, and policymakers to understand what's really holding the sector back from becoming nature positive. And 3 clear challenges emerged. First, destination disconnect. There's often a gap between tourism businesses, destination authorities, and conservation experts. Everyone wants to act, but they're not always aligned on local priorities. So better coordination at destination level is critical if we want destination regeneration. Second, measuring impacts and dependencies. Businesses told us they struggle to know what to measure and how to measure it. Nature is complex and local, so we need clearer, simpler ways to understand both our impacts on nature and our reliance on it. And third, working with supply chains. Tourism supply chains are long and diverse, and many impacts sit far beyond a business's direct control. Companies need practical ways to engage suppliers and lift standards across the chain. Through our Nature Positive Tourism Explained series, we're tackling these practical challenges head on. And today, we're focusing on regenerating destinations, how better collaboration, locally relevant action, and guidance can help us beyond protection to actively restore the natural assets that make tourism competitive, resilient, and unique. And today's program really reflects that whole spectrum. We've brought together conservation expertise, destination leaders, industry voices, and NGOs. This mix is exactly what's needed because destinations become truly nature positive when science, policy, business, and community voices connect and stay connected. So thank you again for being part of this conversation. It's a crucial moment for nature, for climate, and for the future of our sector. And Becky, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. To begin today's discussion, it is my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Ante Mandic, Coordinator of Knowledge Development at TAPIS IUCN. Ante, over to you.
Thank you so much, Becky. First of all, thank you, Nature Positive Partnership, for having me here today. Good afternoon, good morning, colleagues, friends, partners of nature. It's really a pleasure to join you for this important conversation on regenerating destinations through nature positive tourism. From my personal perspective, this is not just another discussion about the sustainability. It's also about how tourism can really actively become a guardian of nature, restoring the ecosystems, but also communities that it depends on. So today I will share some key insights from our recent IUCN WCPA issues paper on strengthening sustainable tourism role in biodiversity conservation and community resilience, and also explore how we can turn that knowledge in measurable action on the ground. Let me just move to the next slide. Okay. So we are living through a decisive moment. Global biodiversity is declining at unprecedented rate, threatening the ecosystems that sustain both lives and livelihoods. Yet the very sector that depends most on these ecosystems, which is tourism, also hold immense potential to help regenerate them. So this paradox really lies at the heart of our work in the IUCN Tourism and Protected Areas Specialist Group. Through IUCN Resolution 130 and our issues paper number 7, we make a simple case. Sustainable tourism, when grounded in science and inclusive governance, is not just compatible with conservation, it's indispensable to it. The question is not whether tourism impacts nature, as it always does, but how we design and govern those impacts to achieve regenerative outcomes. So today's discussion is about that pathway, how policy, science, and practice can really converge to make nature positive tourism both credible and scalable. Across all regions, ecosystems, forests, reefs, wetlands, and wildlife corridors are under increasing pressure. Tourism is a part of that story, but it's also part of the solution. As we heard already, more than 80% of tourism goods and services rely on healthy ecosystems. And nature-based tourism contributes roughly $600 billion each year and supports over 20 million jobs. But for every dollar invested in conservation, 5 or 6 are still spent on the activities that harm biodiversity. So we are financing degradation faster than we are financing the protection. Tourism is not inherently an adversary of nature. It becomes one when poorly managed. When guided by evidence and genuine community partnership, it can shift from being a source of pressure to a force of regeneration. So our task is really to unlock that potential, embedding it into how destinations are planned, financed, and most importantly, governed. The policy architecture is already in place. Within IUCN Resolution 130, established a mandate to integrate sustainable tourism in biodiversity and community resilience policy, reframing tourism as a partner in conservation. The UN General Assembly Resolution 78-260 declares 2027 the International Year of Sustainable and Resilient Tourism, which is signaling global commitment. And the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, particularly Targets 1 and 3, set a shared goal: manage all areas sustainably and conserve 30% of land and sea by 2030. So the framework exists. The real challenge is the implementation, turning policy in measurable regeneration that people and ecosystems can truly feel. Turning this vision in impacts requires systems that connect intent with result. At IUCN, our approach builds on 4 interconnected pillars. First of them is conservation financing. Tourism generates roughly $600 billion annually, yet little of it supports nature. Redirecting visitor fees, concessions, and corporate contributions in protected and conserved areas can create stable funds for restoration. Second is community resilience. Sustainable tourism must diversify local livelihoods, especially for indigenous people and local communities. When communities benefit from guiding, hospitality, or small enterprises, they become invested stewards of their ecosystems. Third is the inclusive governance. Lasting conservation emerges from shared management. Co-governance models rooted in free, prior, and informed consent ensure decisions reflect local priorities and the benefits are distributed fairly. And finally, science-based monitoring. Using the IUCN Green List, for example, or WTTC criteria, both destinations and attractions, and biodiversity indicators, we can measure whether tourism investment indeed deliver genuinely ecological and social gains. So together, these 3 pillars make nature-positive tourism operational, translating ambition in evidence-based regeneration for both people and the planet. Across continents, we see tourism already driving measurable change. These are some of the case studies we outline in IUCN Issues paper. In Peru and Vietnam, for example, community tourism in 4 protected areas links biodiversity monitoring and forest restoration directly to local livelihood. And this is turning governance in shared benefits. The Iberostar Group's Waves of Change initiative restores corals and mangroves, promotes sustainable seafood, and embeds biodiversity indicators across its operations, proving that scale and integrity can coexist. In Impal's national parks, visitor fees are reinvested through community cooperatives, foundings, conservation, and education. Tourism is financing resilience at 4,000 meters. In UAE coastal lagoons, projects integrate ecosystem service valuation and planning, aligning blue carbon investments with coastal protection. The message across all these case studies is consistent. Sustainable tourism can finance biodiversity and build community resilience only when governance and benefit flows are aligned. So the transition to nature-positive tourism really demands a collective action. Businesses, for example, should move from compliance to measurable contributions, integrating biodiversity indicators in their strategies, for example, or using frameworks such as proposed GSTC standards, WTTC toolkits, or IUCN Green List standards. Destinations must embed biodiversity in master plans and investment decisions, making ecosystem health a measure of success. Stronger coordination between tourism boards, DMOs, conservation agencies, and local authorities is essential. And finally, communities, especially indigenous and local, must lead through stewardship and traditional knowledge, underpinned by free, prior, and informed consent. Through regeneration, requires equity, but also ownership and voice. As we concluded in our paper, tourism must become more than an economic activity. It must be the cornerstone of a conservation strategy built on equity, inclusivity, and regeneration. So let me close with a simple reflection. Tourism has the power to regenerate if we choose to design for nature, measure what matters, and invest in people. This is not a theoretical discussion. It's a design choice, one that determines whether our destinations degrade or endure. So I invite all of us, the businesses, destinations, and communities, to ask, how can we align tourism operations with biodiversity priorities in ways that are measurable and meaningful? I look forward to the discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ante, for a great presentation and a wonderful setting of the scene, particularly in the policy framework, and highlighting that the key challenge that we continue to face is implementation. If I can, I would like to ask a question that's come through live in the Q&A, if you could potentially answer this one. So nature positive is an inspiring concept, but often considered difficult to operationalize. The question being, how can we truly achieve nature positive tourism, and how do you verify these outcomes?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. It's a really important one, and I believe that the aim of the seminar today is basically to answer it. So hopefully we will have various different examples showcasing how to measure and use different measurement approaches to identify if certain activities are indeed nature positive or not. But I would emphasize maybe something that Christopher did stated in his introductory presentation, and that's the coordination, measurement, and working with the supply chain. So basically, three most important aspects of nature-based tourism. And at this point, I believe that designing proper KPIs for nature positive tourism activities is going to be one of the critical challenges to place nature positive in the practice.
Great, thank you, Ante. I think that sums it up excellently there. I think it's time that we bring in one of our expert panelists, and I'd like to invite Boris Barov to the screen here and ask a question that we have. Setting the scene here as a tourism business has been advised to prioritize ecological restoration in their portfolio of nature supporting activities. What does this involve, and how can they be sure that they're doing it in the right way? Boris?
Thank you, Rebecca. This is a great question, and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. This is really a basic question. What is ecological restoration, first of all? Because there are many different terms and kinds of activities related to nature, conservation, restoration, and so on. So I think it's important to start from this, what ecological restoration means. Well, ecological restoration means basically helping damaged or modified ecosystems to recover to their natural state, or as close as to a natural state as possible, so that they can support native flora, native fauna, and ecological processes that drive the benefits, that deliver the benefits to people, including to tourists, by the way, and to local communities. My organization, the Society for Ecological Restoration, describes restoration also as part of a continuum of actions. Depending on where you are on this continuum, you can be, your tourist business can be, or destination can be located in a very degraded ecosystem, rarely, but it can happen, or in a very pristine ecosystem. So depending where you are on that continuum, there are different actions that can be taken in order to move your position as close to recovery as possible, which is the goal here. Just so to say on a very high level, and because this can be discussed in great detail, but in very high level, the recommendations that our organization give is that, first of all, you should use sound and science-based methods, but that are suitable and fit your local environment. Secondly, you should use methods which are traceable. You can clearly track progress and share and demonstrate results from the board of directors of your own company to the general public. And thirdly, not least importantly, it is important to make sure that whatever you do reduces risks and make your investment deliver real lasting benefits for nature and people. So ecological restoration is based on the idea that it reduces risk of investment because it increases sustainability, acceptance, and positive benefits. And finally, our organization can provide assistance to the tourism industry as a whole by connecting you to a global network of experts, either researchers, practitioners, or entrepreneurs who can help plan and carry out practical restoration actions at the destination level. So, in summary, ecological restoration means actively repairing nature based on trusted global standards in the activities so that your tourism businesses can be truly supportive for a healthy and resilient ecosystem.
Thank you, Boris, and a great input there in defining ecological restoration, but also noting that different actions are required depending on where you are and the ecosystem in which you're operating in. So thank you for your insight there. To keep everything moving with this presentation, I would like to introduce our next speaker, sharing the destination perspective. On today's call, we would like to introduce Gwen Reyes, Strategy Lead from Visit Scotland. Gwen, the floor is yours.
Hi, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Oh, I've got it here. Great, thanks. It just popped up. So thank you, and a big hello to everyone from Scotland. I'd like to add my thanks for inviting Visit Scotland to be part of these important discussions. And I wanted to start this section by looking at what motivates people to take a holiday. So according to our last visitor survey, connecting with nature was in the top 2 motivations for taking a holiday, alongside travelling somewhere new. Slightly higher if the visitors were from the UK or Europe, and slightly lower for our long-haul destinations, which is to be expected. If you're travelling long-haul, you expect to be going somewhere new. And when it comes to Scotland's offering, you can see from the same survey that it's our #1 reason for visiting, with 70% of our visitors saying one of the reasons for choosing Scotland is our scenery and landscape, followed by history and culture at 48%. So at Visit Scotland, we've recently refocused our activities to look at how we sustainably grow the value of Scotland's visitor economy. And we do that through place development, how tourism and events can deliver sustainable growth for our local places, through business and experience development, helping tourism and events businesses to grow and access new markets, and through market development, attracting visitors that will deliver year-round tourism and events spend across the whole of Scotland. So to focus in on one aspect of that today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about our work in business and experience development. So at Visit Scotland, we have a dedicated team working with businesses to develop tourism products and events that will give visitors memorable experiences, tread lightly on the destination, and drive long-term sustainable growth for the business, benefiting the wider community. A key aspect of this is helping them to develop bookable tourism products for sale via the OTA, like Expedia or Get Your Guide, or via tour operators and travel advisors. Examples of products we've helped businesses develop include campfire ranger talks in our dark sky parks, tractor-trailer tours to get close to our iconic Highland Coos, which is a great example of diversification from farming to tourism, and nature-led cycle tours in both rural and urban places, such as Glasgow, which you wouldn't naturally expect for a nature-based tour. Businesses might have existing products that they're struggling to sell year-round, or we might work with them from scratch. We provide training on what sort of experiences travel trade is looking for and help them with their product pictures and information provision. We also set up workshop events where they can meet tour operators and travel advisors to promote their business. So I've got a case study to share with you. Dundragon Estate up in Loch Ness has been rewilded by Trees for Life since 2008 to recover from centuries of damage caused by sheep, goats and deer grazing. There was a major investment in a visitor centre to set up Dundragon Rewilding Centre, and we got involved with the team at Dundragon to develop bookable experiences that would be of interest to tour operators. We gave them information about what visitors for different countries would be looking for so they could shape and develop their experiences. We worked with them on their travel trade pitch, and they attended Visit Scotland run business development missions and our flagship travel trade event, Visit Scotland Connect, which brings over 200 international tour operators to Scotland each year for one-to-one meetings and familiarisation trips. As a result, the centre now features on tour operator itineraries from countries around the world, allowing visitors to connect with nature and learn more about the important work being done. Additionally, we work proactively with our biggest tour operators to develop new lower carbon itineraries. An example is TTC, with whom we have a well-established relationship. We worked with their Kontiki brand to develop a new itinerary, including Dundragon, and we followed that by a kayaking experience on Loch Ness. This enabled a younger audience to explore this part of Scotland, and there are departures all through the year. We also partnered with Tourism Care's Meaningful Travel Map, and Scotland was the first European destination to feature on the map, highlighting tourism businesses who have a positive impact in their communities. But we can't control where people go, and in particular, we can't control the social media effect that sometimes means local areas become overwhelmed by the number of visitors at particular times of year. So in the final minute, I just wanted to share some of the work we do collectively in Scotland around visitor management. As we emerged from the COVID pandemic and people were choosing countryside rather than city breaks, we saw that some areas were becoming overwhelmed. We established a visitor management group with membership from all the key bodies, including Nature Scot, our 2 national parks, Forestry Land Scotland and local authorities. We have an agreed strategic framework and coordinated activity plans with a number of different groups looking at aspects such as rangers, transport, marketing, education, and digital. It's been working well to try and mitigate challenges and also has helped drive further investment in projects such as public transport and active travel. So the key thing I'd like to leave with you today from a destination perspective is that collaboration is critical to success for destination stewardship. Understand what the opportunities are and collaborate, tread lightly, ensure that tourism works for the visitor, it works for the place, and it works for the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. And I think an excellent note that you end on there with a very poignant point of what we're talking about here today. And fantastic to see all the work that you're doing up there in Scotland, especially in Dundragon. To continue with the presentations today and with the destination perspective, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Christian Zeiden, Senior Director of Regenerative Tourism Operations at the Red Sea Global. Christian, over to you.
I've clicked out. Okay. Let's see my slide. Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, World Travel Tourism Council, for having us for this series of nature positive tourism webinars. For Red Sea Global, regeneration is really the core foundation of everything we do, from the design, from the development to how we build and how we operate our destinations. It's our core business model that we adopt at every stage of our development. And today, precisely for this webinar, I'll be sharing with you how our strong collaboration with our operators and strong partnership with them allow us to deliver tourism that leaves nature, culture, and the communities better off. Allow me first to explain for you a little bit about Red Sea Global. Red Sea Global is a multi-project destination developer that is pioneering regenerative tourism and sustainable development in Saudi Arabia and beyond. We develop destinations that equally contribute to provide luxury tourism, contribute to unparalleled luxury, sustainability, and cultural experience to offer to the world. And that's mainly to position our destinations in the global tourism map globally, and as well to make sure that we create and operate and we manage it beyond just reducing the tourism negative impact of our destination, but as well to actively regenerate the ecosystems and creating net positive benefits to the environment, to the people, to the communities around our destinations. A little bit about our project, just for everyone to know about Red Sea Global and about destinations. We currently manage 2 destinations, Red Sea and Amala. The 2 projects feature a diverse tourism offering that includes resorts, that includes residential tourism activities, that includes a lot of golf courses, of other marinas and the airport to facilitate access of every tourist to our destination. And for those, all these features a lot of tourism offering to our visitors, but we make sure that all these development are done in a responsible manner. These 2 destinations are really becoming living laboratories for regeneration at a scale where we prove and where we demonstrate that environment is not a constraint to our development, but it is really a primary stakeholder that we take in consideration during our development of any project in our destinations. Currently, only 22 of more than 90 islands in our areas are developed, and for Amala is only 5%. We're leaving a lot of our, more than 70% of our islands untouched. We're leaving all this pristine location untouched, and we're developing only very few. In parallel, we're limiting only the tourist access to our destination to 1 million only for Red Sea and 500,000 for Amala. And that also to overcome the challenge that several other destinations are facing in relation to mass tourism and that exhausts the nature around these destinations. Briefly, I will explain on our journey to regeneration that certainly it starts from the inception of our vision towards regenerative tourism to the operation stage. We're leading a new model of regenerative tourism, a model where it's grounded with science, a model that is based on data monitoring and environmental monitoring, where we see that tourism is a force for environmental and social regeneration to drive measurable environmental recovery, wildlife protection, local communities empowerment, and to create a resilient, future-ready operation. And for that, we are really responsible of a massive area of a pristine islands, of thriving corals, of mangroves, volcanic formation, desert heritage, culture, communities around us. We are responsible to safeguard these. And that's why brings our very, very ambitious commitment, one of our nature environmental commitment to drive 30% net conservation benefit to by 2040, by enhancing and restoring the ecosystem, by conserving and protecting the mangroves, the coral, and other very rich ecosystem that we have in our destination. A little bit about our group strategy that makes the foundation of everything we do. It forms it's a platform from where we elevated our goals and ambition to define regenerative tourism principles for the Red Sea Global. From that strategy, we defined key 6 regenerative tourism principles that we adopt and embed in everything we do in our destination, starting from moving beyond the sustainable tourism, the basic things that every destination must do. We need to elevate and bring it to an upper level. It has to be grounded in a multi-stakeholder and partner collaboration. That's why we're here in this webinar to talk about the importance of stakeholders and partner collaboration. It has to be community-centered. It has to be anchored with the community. We need to view tourism as a living ecosystem and not just separately. We build with nature and we build not on the nature. We have to adopt a full life cycle in every decision we take. We have to ensure a net positive impact for the communities, for the people, and the planet around us. All these 6 principles are adopted within every stage of our development. We're embedding the regenerative principles from the very beginning of our development and the design of our projects up to delivery and to the operation. We ensure that there's always a regenerative positive impact on our people, the planet, and the place. Briefly, on every stage, all the efforts that we have done, starting from the pre-concept design stage, construction and operation, that in every stage we make sure to avoid, minimize, restore, and offset all environmental and social impact. Red Sea destination is an example. When we started the design and development of the destination, we ensure that it's going to be all solar farms powered, 100% from renewable energy. Our commitment to clean mobility, where we have all our fleet, be it for land, air, and marine, or EV fleet and electrical for our guests and for our staff. We have developed the largest landscape nursery in our project to support the landscaping in our development and in our landscaping design. We have 1 million square meters of a landscaping that supports our projects, and our aim is to have 30 million plants by 2030 produced from this nursery. In addition to have the mangrove nursery that we have, that's the largest mangrove nursery, 1.5 million mangrove seedlings every year, and that to support our 30% net conservation benefit across our destination. Talking more about the coral gardening, 10,000 corals frags till date, that's almost 60% of what we have to plant, and we have completed coral health assessment as well on a large and vast areas of the coral reef that we have in our location. All that to support our 30% net conservation benefit and commitment that we have at Red Sea Global. That what all the efforts dedicated during development, they were really important to make sure that we move that to the operation stage. Our regenerative ambition can only be realized through the commitment of Red Sea Global, but not alone. That has to be together with our partners at every tourism operator in our destination. So we can transform together Red Sea Global tourism principles, not just to stay as a principles, but to bring it into action by focusing on these key operational components that together with our operators, we work and strive to achieve it. And that what will enable us to redefine responsible tourism and to demonstrate how regenerative tourism should look like for Red Sea Global and as well for the world. Starting from sustainable operation, that's a basic thing that we have to do. The ecosystem regeneration, it's a mandatory element of our operational components to make sure that we all work together to restore, enhance natural habitat, protecting native species, and delivering measurable net positive ecological outcome. We can't forget about the culture and heritage of Saudi Arabia that together with our operators, we strive also to safeguard it, to preserve it, and to celebrate it together with them. Economic resilience and prosperity, that's a key component at the operation of any tourism destination. Impactful visitor experience, and in the previous session, it was clearly mentioned how much the visitors that would like to come to a destination to connect with the nature in that destination. We need to create authentic, inclusive, and transformative visitor journey that inspire our visitors, and at the same time, it has to improve their awareness about regeneration and about the nature conservation. Local communities empowerment, that's the last one. We need to work together with our operators on ensuring that we're building skills, creating tourism job opportunities, and that will help to strengthen the long-term well-being of our communities and the resilience by providing job for them and by supporting their improvement as well. Operators partnership is based on 4 key things that's what we believe we need to ensure. Tourism operators are the co-custodians of our destinations, not only of us as a developer, but they play a key role in supporting that. Regeneration, it requires shared responsibilities and aligned standards. Consistency across all tourism assets has to be ensured. When you talk about resorts, about all the sports, leisure, entertainment facilities, transportation, mobility, be it air or marinas or others, we need to ensure consistency across all tourism assets and certainly collaborative governance is essential as well. From there, allow me to present in a summary the three shared partnership pillars for regenerative tourism. Starting with first one, the shared vision and governance, the shared regenerative framework that we share with our operators, with aligned principles and KPIs. We all strive together with our operators to report on these KPIs and to achieve the Red Sea Global Regenerative Tourism vision as a whole. Regular operator forums that will make sure that we communicate with our operators. Innovation, problem solving, collaboration is key with our operators. Certainly incentive in any tourism destination, recognizing the effort of the tourism businesses in a destination is always key to encourage them to continuously improve and achieve the net positive impact. The second key pillar of our partnership is focused on standards, operation, and accountability, where we provide our operators with clear operational guidelines on environment, on culture, on sociocultural conservation, on community, and all other aspects related to people and planet. So these operational guidelines, it helps the operator to know what we have and how we have to operate in a destination that is aiming for regenerative tourism targets. Joint monitoring and reporting, if we don't measure, we can't understand if we are really progressing towards the net positive. And training capacity building is also a key enabler for our operators. It's our responsibility to also enable any tourism operator in our destination to have the right learning, right knowledge to be able to operate in a responsible manner in our destination. The last key pillar is the innovation, community, and guest impact. Innovation with our tourism operators is key. We need to always find solutions for any issues that we have or areas to improve in our destination. The community and cultural integration programs that are co-developed with our operators, we work together with them on reaching the community and engaging the communities in different aspects in the tourism. Regeneration is embedded in guest experience, and that's the last one. It's very essential that the guests, when they arrive to our destination, they feel they are contributing to the regeneration of the destination by planting mangroves, by planting a coral frag. They need to be connected and feeling they are part of the destination. It's our responsibility as a developer, as Red Sea Global, to ensure these key areas fulfilled. The first one, sectoral operation guideline provision, training engagement of our operators, development and implementation of their operational plan, communities outreach, comprehensive onboarding for any new tourism operator arriving to work to operate in our destination in Saudi Arabia, and regular pre-opening inspection and assessment that will help really to engage with our operators and understand if they are really continuously improving and effectively improving. Track and analyze their performance, encouraging them to achieve top-tier regenerative tourism certification, awarding them and recognizing their effort is also a key. And from there, I will give you some examples on how we engage with our communities on joined by environmental biodiversity initiatives that goes on habitat conservation, mangroves, beach protection, sensitive corals protection, unified environmental monitoring program, guest participation and enhance on mangroves, planting activity and corals, and any other guided conservation experience that we offer to our guests. Other social community engagement that we work with our operators, linking them directly with the local artisans to source authentic craft, performance, and cultural products, supporting socioeconomic inclusion by promoting local creators in retail, gifting, the guest experience, and others, sociocultural awareness, and responsible events when it is planned in our destination to ensure it doesn't affect and contribute positively to our community. Economically, yes, certainly the socioeconomic benefit to the community is hiring local content, hiring local talent, supporting SMEs, encouraging them and empowering them to provide and provide supplies or experiences or products to our destination. And the last one is the environmental data innovation and shared learning, joint pilots environmental monitoring with our operator to have a real-time monitoring of the the health of our ecosystem, so we can have an adaptive management of our operation together with our operator. A sustainability data dashboard for transparent performance reporting from our operators, so we can together analyze the trend and understand how effectively we're working, and to ensure that we have continuous improvement towards a positive impact on the people and the planet. And from there, I'll conclude my presentation. And it's good to mention that now we are actively developing a regenerative tourism indicator system, another call for all our partners to support on defining and finalizing a mature, strong indicator system to measure for every destination how effective is this, the KPIs are working towards a net positive outcome. So that's why another call for strong collaboration with our operator and wider partners. It's very essential to finalize a unified framework for all destinations to define what does it mean really a regenerative tourism destination and how to measure the net positive tourism in a destination. That's how I'll conclude. Thank you so much for again for having us, Red Sea Global, part of this webinar, and for the wider audience for listening.
Thank you, Christiane, for an extensive insight into your journey to regeneration with Red Sea Global, particularly the importance of stakeholder engagement and engaging with the community. Very insightful to hear what you've been doing with the project there. For this segment, we'd like to wrap it up with a very short and quick fire Q&A, as we're just mindful of time with plenty of great speakers in the lineup. I'd like to invite Gwen back onto the screen. And Gwen, if I can ask you a question that's come through live in our Q&A from Julian, who has led regenerative nature tourism in Colombia. And he's noted here that he's met some degree of resistance from advocates of sustainable tourism with regards to regenerative tourism, and I'll extend that to the nature positive tourism, nature positive approach. Be interested to know what can be done to be more effective in promoting this new paradigm so that both regenerative tourism, but in this light here, nature positive. I know you've got some great examples in Scotland, so perhaps speaking to what can be done more in the promotion of this approach would be great to hear. Just maybe in a minute to wrap up, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, without knowing what the challenges have been, I think that the key thing that we're finding is positive case studies. So where we've got really good examples of how there is a positive economic impact, it makes sense for the business, how there's a positive impact for the community, how there's a positive impact for the environment, for nature and biodiversity, and being able to demonstrate that. So I think finding those case studies where people like us, so if you can find businesses that are similar, have made a success of it. And certainly in terms of the VIS perspective, we're finding that people want those unique experiences. They want to be connected to nature. It makes it more memorable for them. So again, it's about explaining and bringing that to life for them in terms of what they will get out and actually what they can give back to their local area and the community. There's a real strong growing appetite in that space, I would say.
Certainly. Thank you, Gwen, for your insights there. And Christiane, I would like to welcome you back onto the screen as well, perhaps in just a 30-second wrap up with this question. So given the ecological sensitivity, as you've spoken to with the Red Sea region, how does Red Sea Global integrate environmental data and ecosystem assessments into its planning and infrastructure decisions to minimize harm? And perhaps a second question to hear is, how are you leveraging public-private partnerships to deliver the lasting benefit for both people and nature? Maybe one of those, either of those questions, just a 30-second wrap up on what you can share with us here today on that.
Thank you, Rebecca. Exactly. When it comes to environmental data at Red Sea Global, it's really non-negotiable. Environmental data is the foundation and non-negotiable aspects that inform everything we do, how we develop, how we design during operation and construction. Before we started developing any of our destination, we make sure that environmental data is informing us on that, starting with the foundational baseline studies, marine surveys, spatial surveys, terrestrial surveys to understand what we have, what's the fauna flora that's available in the destination, and to decide where we develop or not in a specific location. The marine surveys for turtle and other, the health mapping of our corals, and to understand the seagrass and all the other ecosystem that we have, how we can conserve it before we decide on where to build and where to develop. And then we moved to environmental monitoring. We installed several water buoys in a different location to continuously have a monitoring on the air, on the water, the marine water quality, and air station to monitor the noise, the dust, and other air quality parameters to ensure, and in addition to the light as well, for our dark sky commitment in the destination. So that's for the foundational baseline studies that we have and the environmental data monitoring. And that it helps us to really inform the master planning and the decision on how we develop. The spatial avoidance, where we can build or not, the sustainable infrastructure as well, to ensure, example that I explained now, for all utilities to have it centralized. We have all demand energy needs, and we decided let's have our solar farm very close by in our destination. We have decided to have also our supply chain logistic, a centralized model that we adopt, our waste management facility. So all the numbers and data helps us to decide on any decision related to our destination development. And for now, continuously, the real data monitoring, the AI, the underwater drones, and the drones that continuously survey all our ecosystem and nature ecosystem to ensure that we have an adaptive management. If there is any issue, we immediately rectify. If there is any exceedance, we immediately react to that and rectify. That's from this first aspect of the question. I'm not sure if I have time to answer the second one when it comes to
We might wrap it up there, just knowing that we have a few more speakers in the lineup, but perhaps we can come back to it at the end. But thank you so much, Christiane.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Some fantastic work there in the Red Sea Global. Well, that was fantastic to hear the examples and what is happening on the ground at the destination level. We'd now like to move to the business perspective, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Keisha Morgan, Head of Sustainability at Exodus Adventure Travels. Keisha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Becky. Great to be here, and hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know Exodus, Exodus Adventure Travels is a small group tour operator taking mostly UK and North American customers on trekking, cycling, and cultural adventures across around 100 countries globally. On to the next slide, please. Key to how we design our trips, engage our customers, and give through our foundation is what we call our Thriving Nature, Thriving People plan. And it's built around this recognition of that inextricable link between thriving nature and thriving communities. You can't have one without the other. And we as a business have increasingly been focusing our sustainability and impact work over the last 5 years on supporting this vital virtuous circle, if you like, between the two. Not least because we know that a healthy natural world is not only vital for a healthy tourism sector, as we've heard, but also that tourism has a unique opportunity to connect people to nature and to encourage them to play their part in halting and reversing global biodiversity loss. Next slide, please. So we seek to deliver on this through our 3-year goals, which cover aspects of carbon and waste reduction, empowerment of local communities, and ways in which we can be a purposeful and responsible business. Next slide. And zooming in on the goals which more specifically focus on nature, these follow a nature positive approach. So we've aligned the action sitting behind these goals with the goals of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and they follow the mitigation hierarchy of looking at how we can remove and reduce our negative impacts, and beyond that, how we can support the restoration and regeneration of nature. And today, I'm just going to be sharing 3 brief examples of this, how through our adventures, our customers, and our foundation, we're trying to support the restoration of nature. So on to the next slide. Our biggest footprint by far is in Italy. So we take significantly more guests than there to Italy than anywhere else. So it's certainly a place in which we have an impact on nature and in which we have a number of nature dependencies. So when we first started thinking about where we should start supporting the restoration of nature more proactively, we wanted to focus our efforts here. And through Rewilding Europe, we were able to support a pioneering program to rewild 5 nature corridors between 5 national parks in the central Apennines, helping to restore local ecosystems there and promoting free passage of species, including the endangered Marsican brown bear. And we've done so by committing to fund the rewilding of 100 square metres per passenger who travel with us since 2021, to date having supported the rewilding of 650 hectares in these nature corridors. We've also been able more recently to start running a trip to the area, enabling customers to visit what is a beautiful but often far less visited part of Italy, while bringing the economic benefit of nature tourism to an area which has previously been rather deserted by its younger generations. And all profits from the trip go back to rewilding Europe's work in this area. On to the next slide. In 2022, we launched our Citizen Science Departures, equipping groups of customers across a selection of our trips with kits to capture freshwater environmental DNA samples. These are then analysed by our partner Naturemetrics and the data uploaded to the IUCN's Global eBioAtlas, which in turn helps inform conservation efforts. But we're actually just about to launch the next chapter for our Citizen Science programme, a partnership with iNaturalist, which will enable many more of our customers to directly support conservation science through their adventures. iNaturalist have an app which enables users to identify and document wildlife by taking photos or recordings, and this data can then be used by scientists and conservationists globally. We'll be encouraging and supporting our customers to use this app on their adventures, and we've worked with iNaturalist to identify specific destinations in which they have particular observation gaps, which we're hopeful that our customers will be able to help fill. And finally, on the last slide, most recently, through our charitable foundation, we have launched what we call our Wild at Heart campaign. This awareness and fundraising campaign supports projects across some of our key destinations, which engage and equip local communities to protect key species. And this includes our Tiger Habitat project in India, our Free to Roam Elephant Conservation project in Kenya, our Primate Survival project in Vietnam, and our Jaguar Resilience project in Costa Rica. And all of these projects include aspects of community empowerment, whether that's through employment as rewilding rangers or protection of key farming land from animals, minimising human-animal conflict, or the development of ecotourism locally. And in this way, not only do we hope to further our support for that key relationship between thriving nature and thriving communities, we also seek to ensure that our customers come home from their adventures further engaged in that vital need to protect our natural world and the role their travels can play in this. So thank you very much. Back to you, Becky.
Thank you, Keisha. It's great to hear of all the examples that you have at Exodus, particularly engaging through initiatives like Citizen Science. A continued theme into this presentation as well on community empowerment, and also focusing on the experience of the traveler and how they can take that forward, of their love for nature and how that can result in action. So fantastic to hear everything that you're doing with your work. To continue the business perspective, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Camilla Drevellon, Chief Strategy Officer at Abercrombie & Kent. Camille, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And I think the good news to start with is I'll be saying a lot of the same things as the people who came before me. And that really does show that we're getting to a place where concepts are in place, the guidelines are there, and we can all work in a way to make an even bigger impact. So if you could please go to the next slide. Just a quick overview of A&K. I think many of you have heard about A&K. We are in some ways similar to Exodus, but in reality, A&K started at the destination level. So in 1962, Geoffrey Kent and his family were living in Kenya, and they came up with the concept of, Jeff says, shooting with a camera, not with a gun. And Jeff is actually also a founding member of the WTTC, and he's still today probably got more energy than half the office here in London, because he is the most passionate person I know about travel, but also about community. And so Jeff very quickly realized as he grew the business that A&K as a company could go quite far, but a key component that also I see Exodus does is the philanthropy and the foundation part of it. And so 20 years later, in 1982, we launched A&K Philanthropy, which is really an extra reach for A&K, for our staff, for our guests, to be able to impact in ways that are more creative and more directly on the ground. So today we have offices in many different destinations. There's a map here that gives you an idea. You can see very strong presence in Latin America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia. And as you can also see, a lot of these destinations are in the at-risk categories, whether that be for wildlife, for climate change. And so we've been able to really drive what we see as sustainable travel making a difference in all these different places. So if you could please go to the next slide, I wanted to illustrate what we do with some more practical examples. So the first one here is in the Galapagos in Ecuador. On the left-hand side, you can see a quick summary of what we do there. We have a business called Ecoventura. We have 3 yachts that are 10 cabins each, and they are called Origin, Evolve, and Theory. There's a very strong link to Darwin in that destination. So what happened in the Galapagos is seen, I think, by most as a very successful way to grow water-based tourism. Very early on, the regulations were put into place about capping ship counts, visitor counts, regulating places where ships and people could land, setting fixed itineraries. But I think even more interestingly, everything was around education. So hiring local guides, local staff, and training them to have this common thread across the whole experience of respect and conservation. And so you can see on the right these different building blocks. So access control, low impact operations, so small vessels, very strict waste management, high standards. And through that, they were able to get significant conservation funding, park fees, and we spoke about that a little earlier today, that support science and enforcement, and also fund species control and monitoring in island locations that is quite often a high risk. And that has generated this ecosystem and how can I say, improvement and strengthening, because the local species are protected. The ecosystem in general doesn't see mass tourism the way that it could have, because it is a destination that is extremely, extremely attractive. And the community sees the benefit through employment and also local sourcing. So we source most of our food locally, whatever we can purchase, but also any work that's done to refit the ships, and all of our staff and crew, our shoreside teams are all local. So the benefits are both from an employment perspective as well as from money coming in from tourism. And so the last step here is reinforcement, which is a common theme. So there is this virtuous cycle where the environment stays as it is or improves, people want to come, conservation limits, but still allows value creation from what is there, and then you stay in this very balanced approach and beneficial for the operator and for the community. And if you could go to the next slide, I have a different destination, but just to show that the concepts are the same. Here, this is in Bwindi in Uganda, which is another very fascinating destination, but also very fragile. So early in the 1990s, A&K was one of the first operators to return to Uganda and collaborated very closely with rangers, with authorities, because we knew that tourism would boom, especially in Bwindi, around the forest. This is where some of the mountain gorilla populations are. And so the government really thought about how they could monetize the experience and set a framework that would benefit the entire region. And so in, I'm going to say 1993, I should have it somewhere else, they decided to put into place the permits for gorillas. And today these cost $800 per person. So it is a material investment for the guest that's visiting, but also a material contribution to the local economy. And so these same concepts as in Ecuador and the Galapagos apply here. So access control, high value, limited gorilla permits, small groups, hygiene rules. You have low impact operations through professional rangers, managed routes, briefings and education, that's a common thread, conservation funding where the permit money goes directly towards the rangers, the patrols, the vets. They monitor the gorillas very closely. The overall health of the population in the gorillas has greatly improved. And then because the communities also see the benefits and the interest there is in the destination for this sanctuary for gorillas, they then have a very different approach to the forest and to the way that they use resources. And so alongside the employment benefits, community benefits, A&K Philanthropy is very active in Bwindi, especially in healthcare, education. You get to this balance in a very sensitive location between this high-end tourism and the respect for the community, for the destination, and sustainable and very managed growth. And so if you go to the last slide here, what we think matters, and again, I'll be saying what many of my colleagues have said earlier in the presentation. What would we say matters the most? Work with the right partners, for sure. So collaborate with authorities, communities, and experts. What we see as important is ultimately we are a tourism operator. So we have our own teams on the ground. We bring guests from all over the world. Others will have expertise that matters and that we need to consider. So working with the right people that have the right mindset means that you can really have the impact that you want, and also a mindful impact. Champion high value, low impact tourism. With Abercrombie & Kent, it is on the higher end in terms of the package pricing, etc. But as we just saw with Exodus, it's not necessarily about the money. When we say high value, it's definitely allowing enough investment and funds to go to the community, but also making sure that we have the local impact that makes sense and that really changes a destination. And then think long term. I mean, we've been around for many years and we plan to be around for much longer. And people look at you differently when you're there to stay, when you consider the destination to become your home. And so this is something that we see as a good balance between the business hat and the community sustainable hat. We are guests, and this is written on the slide. The ecosystem belongs to local communities, and so we need to earn the right to operate. And if you can switch to the last slide, I have a couple of photos that were taken recently around Gorilla Forest Lodge. I think this just gives you a sense of the peace and amazement that you feel when you're on the ground. And that's the sort of thing that we hope to be able to share with more people in the right way. That was it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. And I think the saying here is correct. And a picture tells a thousand words, and that really does set a scene of tranquility and the importance of protecting nature. And as you say at the end there, that we are guests in these ecosystems, and it's about respecting what we love and the experiences that we get to enjoy. So thank you so much for your presentation. We'd like to do another short Q&A to wrap up this section. If I could invite Keisha back onto the screen. We have a question directly from the Q&A, and it speaks specifically to, I think you mentioned in your presentation, Italy. So the question here, if I may ask, is what system or platform did you use to understand that Italy is the country in which you have the biggest footprint? And have you benchmarked all your operations entirely to reach that conclusion? If you could maybe in a minute or two wrap up to that question, that'd be great. Thank you, Keisha.
Yeah. Of course. So back in 2020, 2021, when we first started trying to develop our nature positive strategy, nature positivity wasn't something that was really talked about in the travel sector at that point. So we were taking learnings from the construction industry and the fashion sector, who were starting to talk about this concept of nature positive. As such, there was frankly a lot of cobbling together things and learning as we went. And we used a basic proxy at that point for where we had the greatest footprint and the greatest impact. How many passengers did we take there, and related to that, things like our carbon footprint and so on. Subsequently, there are some fantastic resources that have emerged, such as WTTC's Nature Positive resources, which give a lot more guidance on exactly how we can more systematically understand where our most material impacts are, our impacts and our dependencies. And we continue on that journey to try to figure out where those impacts and dependencies are, to continue to shape our focus and our activities. And some of those are going to be destination specific, like the projects in Italy and Vietnam and Costa Rica and so on. And some of them, because we're a tour operator operating across many countries, are going to be more general. How can we equip our customers, whatever destination they go to try to support nature regeneration? So it's going to, I'm sure, continue to be a mix of both, but we continue to learn and develop.
Great, thank you so much, Keisha. And Camille, if I could invite you back onto the screen. I believe there's a few questions for you in the Q&A, but we have one here. If I could ask, what nature-related risks do you think the tourism sector is underestimating? And in your opinion, how should companies be preparing for them?
Thank you. So I think there are a few that we can all think of. I'll mention one in particular is the fact that many destinations are reaching a stress point that means that things need to change. And I'll take the example of the Inca Trail in Peru. That is a destination that we visited for many years, and it is, I think, on the bucket list of most people. But we are seeing that the erosion of the path is significant, and planning ahead would be critical. So finding other paths and maybe regulating volumes a little bit differently. So that is one of the examples, but we see many, and I think everybody on this call will know more. So the fact that the world is changing, the environment is changing, and we shouldn't just look at up and coming destinations, but also places that are considered to be almost run of the mill and somewhere where everybody needs to go, because unfortunately that will not be the case. And working together and operators preemptively engaging governments or local communities that may not want to ask themselves that question, because often it is a source of revenue and predictability. That means that you can work together to maybe, again, expand seasons, find new routes. So this is what I see as one of the biggest risks in these destinations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Camille. We'd like to bring in another one of our experts to help us round out this destination section Q&A before we move on to the NGO perspective. We have a great presentation coming up there. If I could please invite to the screen, Dr. Kelly, I have a great question for you here. I know there's several in the Q&A chat as well, but to this one specifically, we're living in a changing world and changing times. So how should tour operators redefine their role to create travel experiences that help the destination to thrive? Kelly, it'd be great to hear your insights.
Thank you, Rebecca. Certainly it's a pleasure to be here and to learn as well from all of our experts that have been giving wonderful presentations. And I think in my answer to this, you'll hear remnants of what people have said already, but certainly the context of tourism is rapidly changing. We need to reshift our thinking on how we participate. And one of the things that comes to mind based on the research that I've done in this area is becoming a strategic partner in destination stewardship. And tour operators take that role sometimes very seriously, as we already have heard. And that's just, rather than just selling tours, the operator actually becomes a stakeholder, as we've heard, in the future of that particular destination. And they partner with local communities, they partner with public agencies, and they work closely with conservation bodies in shaping how tourism develops. And I think something else that we've seen is being a curator of meaningful and place-anchored experiences. And we've seen excellent examples of that this morning. But tour operators then become a player in moving beyond the checklist of tours that a person may want to be a part of, but rather a curator of the experience. And they foster those deeper connections between travelers, place, culture, and nature. And they add value to the destination, as we've just heard in the most recent example, rather than commodifying it. And I think another idea quickly was to be that economic bridge between local communities and what tourism is actually doing. And I see that as a real important emerging strategy that we have seen tour operators engage. And this is where they become a significant portion of the value of that generates incomes and adds to economic development, but also creates partnerships with those in their supply chain. So they're not just helping destinations truly thrive economically, but they're also adding a social and an environmental component to the overall strategy that they engage in with their tours. And then lastly, I would say, as we've heard, and I think have seen excellent examples, is becoming guardians of nature and culture in the destination. And this is where they proactively help protect and enhance the environmental, cultural, and heritage assets that a destination may have. And they actually become true stewards of these places and experiences.
Thank you, Professor Kelly. Plenty to unpack in that answer there. And I love how you bring it back to the idea of the guardians of nature and what a great notion that is. Really, within travel and tourism, we have a privileged perspective here and a role to play that's integral to nature conservation. And it's only been exemplified in the presentation so far. And that brings me to the final section that we have here, a great presentation awaiting from the NGO perspective. And it is my pleasure to introduce Francesca Mahoney, Founder and Executive Director at Wild Survivors. Fran, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Becky. And yeah, thank you to everyone at the World Travel and Tourism Council and Nature Positive Tourism. It's wonderful to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those from all around the world joining us today. So thank you for joining this final talk after a really fantastic and very inspiring webinar, hearing from everybody. So I'm going to be introducing our perspective from Wild Survivors in Tanzania. As Becky mentioned, I'm the founder and executive director of Wild Survivors. We're a UK registered charity, but also we're an international NGO registered in Tanzania. And that's really where all of the projects are based and run from Tanzanian leadership in country. So to start us off, I'm going to take you to the Ngorongoro crater. As many of you might know it well, if you do work across Africa and certainly East and Sub-Saharan Africa with your destinations or partnerships. So the Ngorongoro crater is a world famous tourism destination. It's this giant bowl of biodiversity, this huge caldera, which literally supports thousands of animal species and thousands of people. And it's connected across the greater, wider Serengeti ecosystem. So, you know, it's actually part of this major tourism industry in Tanzania, which contributes around 17% of Tanzanians' GDP, which obviously supports millions of people as well. But in places like the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, where, you know, thousands of visitors, it's around 750,000 tourists visit just the crater alone every year. Coming to this extraordinary landscape, but communities at the boundary of these areas actually live with daily issues, specifically the ones that we try to support, which is to address human-elephant conflict. So it's at this tension really is at the heart of our work, these iconic destinations, critically important ecosystems, but also the frontline villages and communities that are bearing the costs of coexistence. And unfortunately, in many cases, these are the communities who only receive a fraction of the revenue that's generated by the landscapes that they do protect and they historically have always protected. So to give you an idea of the challenge, so human-elephant conflict is pretty complex and it really undermines a lot of conservation initiatives. And it's a huge driver of social economic issues as well for communities who are living alongside our huge, amazing, gentle giants when we see them out in the wild. But elephants are actually under, you know, huge pressure for their survival. Of course, they were threatened by poaching, which really spiked in the last epidemic from around 2013, 2015. And that's when Wild Survivors was launched, was to really try and address the drivers of poaching at a local level. And that was actually stemming from conflict that farmers and elephants were engaged in. So now human-elephant conflict and habitat loss is the greatest threat to elephant survival. And as we all know in tourism as well, in destinations, elephants are a species which bring in a huge amount of income into tourism, but they're also absolutely critically important to the functioning of these ecosystems that they're sharing with communities. So as you can see in this top photo here on the image, this is actually the other side of the crater. So as it comes down the escarpment into the Manyara and Salela Valley, the communities here actually are living alongside elephant corridors. And this one in particular is the Upper Kiteti Elephant Corridor, one of the last remaining corridors that connect elephants across now quite a fragmented landscape. But of course, people also depend on the same resources. And women are particularly marginalized in these areas. You know, they bear all the responsibilities for collecting firewood and water. So they're coming into dangerous interactions with elephants almost daily and nightly. Elephants also enter farms. So the beauty of the Ngorongoro Crater and surrounding area as a volcanic landscape, Great Rift Valley, very fertile, beautiful for farmland. So many people have cultivated various crops there that are subsistence crops and cash crops. These are highly attractive to elephants. It's like sugar. They want to come for it all the time. They've actually got a plentiful supply of flora in the crater forest, but they're attracted to the farms because they can smell out these maturing crops like maize and wheat. So they come and step into the farms because there's no barrier to stop them. And they can clear an acre in about 15 minutes, which is devastating for these communities. So historically, they're engaging in a lot of conflict, using poisoning and having to use these sort of methods to try and prevent elephants coming in. But also historically, they would be recruited by poaching gangs who needed local trackers, and they would prey upon vulnerability of farmers who are losing everything to elephant crop raids. So we started to address this issue at the heart of it, and we always ensure that the community's well-being is very much at the heart of these solutions to elephant crop raiding and conflict. So we design solutions that are really embedded within the community's knowledge. They have an amazing historical knowledge of their environment, and we start by listening. We start by learning about these issues that they're facing and their knowledge contributing to participatory mapping, so we can map together the elephant movement patterns where these conflict hotspots are at the highest. And then we introduce solutions that actually benefit communities, that are managed by communities, that also benefit nature. And it's nature's own solutions and technology, because we can learn so much from nature, as we know. So we introduce things like beehive fences, because elephants have a natural fear of bees. Any bees, anything that stings. But honeybees obviously have this dual benefit, because farmers and women in the communities become beekeepers. And beekeeping derived from Africa anyway, and it's a very traditional practice. So there's often local beekeepers in communities that we also learn from, and they're a crucial part of this introduction to a new thing such as beehive fences that are carefully introduced onto farms. So they help to protect the farms, they dissuade elephants from coming in, and they also act as a natural guide for those elephants to continue onto their migratory corridors safely. So this has had a huge ripple effect. It's helped many of the women in the community to form beekeeping groups, and they're now leading these initiatives themselves because they provide a honey spot market for the farmers who are managing these fences of beehives that are strung on strong wires, and they act like a pendulum fences once they're disturbed by the elephants and the bees rush out. So women have overcome their fear of bees. They're very scary in these parts of Africa. And they now have become stewards of these wildlife corridors as well, which is really wonderful. So they're only succeeding really because there are sustainable market chains in place. And this is where tourism plays an essential role. In fact, there's many roles that our tourism partners play in achieving this success, which I'm going to come to in just a moment. So to give you a quick overview of the first projects that started in Ngorongoro, we've now recorded a 38% increase in farmer profits from farms and crops that have been protected. And we've seen a 91% decrease in elephant crop raids when these fences, these chain links of beehives, have an occupancy of 65% or more. Currently, this fence in Ngorongoro is at 90% occupied, which is amazing. And this really is because they're farmer managed. So these projects are introduced with ownership within the communities from day one. This isn't a wild survivors project, this is a community project, and it's managed and led by the communities that know this landscape the best and are at the heart of these issues. And beekeeping's been really transformative. There's pollination rates, obviously, but also it's a catalyst for forest protection. So it really enhances the community's ability to preserve and protect their forests and see the direct benefit of the ecosystem services, increase in water flow from the rivers, increase in tree coverage and availability of these resources. And there's been a decrease in farmer expenditure on traditional methods, fuel in their tractors that they'd share and chase elephants at night, which is also very dangerous. And the women's beekeeping enterprises have been phenomenal. So we've connected them with our tourism partners in Tanzania, and through the processing at their hub, which you can see Marianne here in the middle, she's tending to some chili crops. Chili is also a great deterrent to elephants. Their hub in the background here is a processing center. So they harvest the honey from the fences and their own apiaries, process it, package and jar it into these beautiful jars of never forget honey. And that's sold into the tourism markets and also into the local markets and communities. And there's different price points to reflect that. Now, this has meant that there's been a sustainable income source that these women's groups have reinvested into their enterprises. So that's gone back into their ability to have capital to keep purchasing this honey from the farmers, which in turn gives the farmers income to keep maintaining the fences. But also they've done things like permaculture gardens. And now they have organic veggies that they supply to their communities. And that's really helped in terms of food security in the drier months and local access to a diversified food source. They reinvested that again to create microloans. And they now provide business loans for women in their community to also help them with financial independence, new skills. And all of this means there's less pressure on farming communities who are living alongside and stewarding these incredible landscapes. So how have our partners played a key role in this? Just switching to the next slide, yes, here we go. So I want to bring you over to Northwestern Serengeti and our partner here with Nomad and Nomad Trust, who we've partnered with for many years now. So in this image here is Mama Kachawi. She has a 1.5 acre farm, which directly borders the northwest side of the Serengeti, near to Grumeti and the Ikoroma Game Reserve. So she plants maize, things that elephants also love. And the elephants here in Northwest Serengeti, they've experienced historically a lot of poaching, and they're especially aggressive, most aggressive that we found in parts of the conflict areas that we respond to. So communities here are at high risk of fatalities, and there's a lot of widowers that we support in these areas, these frontline communities, where farms directly sit next to the Serengeti grass. And Mama Kachawi is one of these incredible women in the communities that we've been able to support with the help of Nomad, with the introduction of beehive fences here, and also her son, Kachawi, who's pictured here. Nomad Trust supported him through the training and his studying at Mweka Wildlife College, so that when he graduated with a conservation study certificate, we were actually also able to employ him as one of our elephant conservation ambassadors. So he's now collecting essential data, because we collect data across all our projects on elephant movement patterns and how effective these different solutions are. So Kachawi is one of our key members in the community, and he's supporting other community members to establish the beehive fences, chili fences, and other methods. And here in the top corner photo is one of the Nomad guides, Rem, who's a wonderful guide, and he works with us at Nomad to welcome guests to visit Mama Kachawi, to see the impact of Nomad's work and our collaboration. So it gives guests a really different experience to see coexistence in action. But the partnerships really allow us to work much faster. So in areas where Nomad have already been working with communities close to their lodges, we're able to come in and respond to the conflict at its peak, and ensure that we can have these key relationships established in the beginning, so we can sit and listen and learn from communities through our partnerships with tourism like Nomad. Also providing fantastic logistical support on the ground where we need it, and further develops our comms and visibility in the ecosystem and beyond. I know we're running over slightly, so apologies. And also another example here with Wilderness, also further along in the Serengeti. So Wilderness and their Children in the Wilderness Foundation have supported the women's groups here with an enterprise and empowerment hub, which is being installed at the moment. So this is a multiple learning site for knowledge exchange and learning in beekeeping, permaculture, and business leadership, conservation leadership for communities. It's where the honey is stocked and sold, and the vegetables, but also it's a really fantastic experience for guests to visit and interact with the communities who are leading these efforts, and to see and collaborate with the Wilderness guests and their tour leaders as well into this central learning hub. And also it's really important because for the tourism partners to help support communities directly with local supply chains. So by purchasing the honey, by purchasing the organic vegetables to support these camps and lodges who traditionally buy produce from Arusha, they can support communities directly with that, which actually is far more sustainable than aid, or other methods. This allows communities to lead in these efforts and promote the protection of their environment through the support of local tourism partners. So a few more examples there. And the slides just, yeah, so just to quickly wrap up in terms of mutual impact, what we can achieve in terms of safer farms, reduced conflict, empowerment of women in the communities, reviving habitat areas and healthier landscapes for tourism and for wildlife to survive long term in these amazing areas. Just a quick point here that, you know, elephants actually spend 80% of their time outside of protected areas. And in Tanzania, the beauty of Tanzania is that it's largely unfenced. So it allows the movement and freedom of movement of these incredible species. But that means that 80% of the time they're outside of protected areas. That's where the important work happens. And that's where tourism can also have an impact, not just on the areas where they're facilitating amazing game drives and experiences, but with the communities who need to steward these ecosystems outside that the protected areas and destinations actually depend on. So these corridors of connectivity are really, really critical. And that's an area that we value with our tourism partners. So thank you so much. A few more areas here about how, you know, tourism can help drive equitable coexistence, which really does need to be at the heart. You know, Indigenous communities, local communities need to be at the heart of these efforts. And, you know, really this is about Tanzania and tourism being, you know, a strongest ally, conservation ally within Tanzania, through listening, supporting local organizations like ourselves to reach these conflict areas faster, building sustainable supply chains that keep benefits rooted within the communities. And we've really seen that that's possible. So thank you so much to all of our tourism partners, conservation partners in Tanzania, and NASA, Off the Beaten Path, Explore Foundation that have worked through Helm the Elephants, Nomad Wilderness, and our partners through Atta for Impact. So thank you all, and I welcome your questions and the opportunity to connect with more partners as well.
Thank you, Fran. A great presentation there, and you bring our attention to some very important issues, but also to the community-led solutions that exist, and you've highlighted many in your presentation here. Quickly, before we jump to some very final quick-fire questions to wrap out today's session, and again, thank you for sticking with us. I know we've just clocked over on this webinar today. I'd like to bring your attention to the action sheet that we are also launching in partnership with this webinar that we have today. This will provide a detailed actionable steps that businesses can take to regenerate their destinations through a nature-positive approach. The action sheet that you see here on the screen will be available on the WTTC Research Hub, and we will also look to share that through the chat function if we can. We encourage you to take a look at this action sheet, share it with your colleagues, and rally together to take action. We've had some great examples here today, and I hope we're all feeling inspired to take the next step forward. I'd also like to highlight here our partners that we produce this action sheet with, being UN Tourism and the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, forming the Nature Positive Tourism Partnership. If I can, we will wrap up with two final questions. If we can get just a 30-second answer on these, that would be fantastic. Inviting Fran back to the screen. Fran, we have a question here, and I know there's plenty more in the chat, but how can we conserve NGOs, how can conservation NGOs inspire and guide tourism businesses to adopt nature-positive practices that protect ecosystems, but also strengthen community resilience? Be wonderful, just 30 seconds to wrap it up. Be fantastic. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Well, it's a huge collaborative process. So I think in terms of looking at, I think others mentioned case studies earlier, but examples of success where community-led conservation and coexistence is already happening. And that's really down to a multitude of factors of support from NGOs, but also from tourism partners. There's so many ways for tourism to get involved, and I think highlight and create awareness through their guests and through their network about these critical issues that we do need to address in a holistic way. And that's really important, done through tourism partnerships with NGOs, with communities, and the communities need to be at the head of the table in all of these conversations. The consultation, the engagement, the ownership of solutions should be with communities. And tourism and NGO partners can work together to ensure that that happens. And I think it's very possible for that to happen.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Fran, and for keeping to that question. I'd like to invite our final expert panelist who has been patiently waiting throughout this webinar, answering many of the questions as they come through, and that is Daniel Turner. Daniel, to round out today's session, again, if you could provide us with a quick wrap up to this question that we have here. In what ways can tourism businesses move beyond compliance to actively protect and restore the natural environments of which they depend on?
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you to WTTC and the Nature Positive Tourism Partnership for this webinar. What a fantastic webinar, full of information for everyone to use. Just as by way of introduction, Animondial is a specialist consultancy. We support the travel sector, and we have been guiding the Nature Positive Tourism Partnership since its inception, and we continue to guide the sector towards their transformational change to a nature positive future. I think in answer to your question, I think we all inspire for a sector that businesses actively protect and restore ecosystems. And we heard from Ant about how businesses absolutely need to understand the state of nature in the destinations that they operate in, understanding the threats to nature and how they can prevent those threats, and understanding the fragile habitats that need to be restored, as was described by Boris. There also needs an absolute need to regenerate the destinations themselves, which host the businesses and their operations. And I think the insights that we were given from Kelly and Gwen were really important, sort of recognizing that there are strategic partnerships within the destinations to help us sort of enhance our efforts to build back the biodiversity on which we depend. And then Francesca just now recognizing that there are NGOs and local people, indigenous people that you can work with to tap into local knowledge and to really enhance that offering. And then lastly, I think that if we can, I think the importance is that there's a lot of drive now, there's a lot of expression of a commitment to nature, but what we really need as soon as possible is to convert that commitment into meaningful action, to really mitigate our impacts on nature and to find those opportunities, those strategic opportunities to build back biodiversity and the nature on which we all rely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. You do a great wrap up of all the presentations that we've had today, and I know you've been busy answering the questions in the Q&A, so thank you again for your expertise that you bring to this webinar. You end on a great point there of converting commitment into meaningful action, and I think that's a great theme that's carried through today's webinar. Well, this brings us to the end of this WTTC webinar, and a big thank you to all the speakers for their contribution and everyone for joining the webinar and all your wonderful engagement and questions. Please note, a post-webinar survey will pop up at the end of this call, and we would be grateful if you could please fill this in. We promise it's just a very quick survey. Please make sure to download the action sheet that we mentioned earlier and check out all the other resources we have on nature positive tourism available on the WTTC Research Hub. I invite you also to save the date for the next 2 webinars that will be in this series, hosted by UN Tourism and the World Sustainability Hospitality Alliance in early 2026. There'll be more details to follow, and I thank you again to our partners at UN Tourism, Dirk, who's joining us here today, and Sophia, as well as from the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance with Glenn, for being here and contributing to this series and the action sheet. With that, I'd like to say a final thank you for joining us and a very warm goodbye. Thank you.